Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Consumer prices in South Korea last month spiked by a whopping 3.7%. For context, that's a high not seen here in nearly a decade. The price of food, utilities, public services and oil have all surged in recent months, and prices show little sign of slowing down anytime soon. Making matters even worse, salaries are most definitely not keeping pace with inflation, and many studies have shown that the government's COVID-related financial support has not eased the financial worries of a great many households.
And also, as more people aren't opening their wallets as much, less money is flowing into the economy, making it a vicious cycle. For more, we connect to Professor Oh Joon-seok from Sookmyung Women's University School of Business. Professor, good morning.
Morning.
Now, how concerned are you about the growing gap between the haves and have-nots in South Korea, and what can be done to remedy this?
We had a flashing beacon, a K-shaped polarization could be a social burden, as you mentioned, and act as a hindrance to sustainable economic growth in the future. In the past, Korea came in the middle of the OECD Gini scale. It's a barometer of income inequality. But recently, according to the report by the Federation of Korean Industries, Korea's comprehensive conflicts index stood at 55.1, with range of 0 to 100, ranked 3, just behind Mexico at 69 and Israel 56.5. The higher the ranking, the severer the level of social conflicts. Based on this measurement, Korea became a highly unequal society, though they believe, including myself, Korea has been relatively equal society. The government policy aims to ease economic discrepancy, but in actuality, the policy mostly has been swayed by vote calculation. Earning money on the street could hypnotize daily burden, political rage, and anger, but it never kept warming for the long time. Job creation and upgrading social mobility is the key, and then designing and operating infrastructure for the lesser group to keep themselves moving forward and upward, that is the right solution. Let them running.
Right, we'll get to social mobility in just a moment, but the vast majority of businesses hardest hit by the virus restrictions that have been imposed on us here in South Korea are the smaller mom-and-pop stores, as we like to call them here. Do you think the pandemic and the government's reaction to it has made this issue of wealth inequality that much more acute?
I'm afraid I think so. As COVID-19 pandemic has been a shock to the economy, it is reasonable to talk about the resistance and resilience against the shock. We could guess, other things being equal, big companies and so-called the haves are afforded to sustain their business or a normal pattern of living relatively longer than those are not. While most of us were in lockdown, there was lower consumer demand and reduced industrial activity, in spite of the fact that the government reaction had no other choice but to increase consumption. But from the view of economics, there leaves room for development, especially timing of policies. In a way to curb down the expansion of the pandemic, the government took a radical action of lockdown. It's a sudden death of all business cycle. As it is proved, the pandemic has prolonged longer than expected. Business people have been sick and tired of a repeated cycle of shutdown and back to the normal. As a result, what happened? They tried to minimize tension point with the market uncertainty, shrinking their businesses, consumption and employment directly. Income polarization has widened accordingly. Expansion in fiscal policy and monetary policy should have been slow and aligned more on targeted income group. With urgency, it has spread widely, turned out to be source of poke battle. As a response, what happened? Series of interest rate hike has done and will be expected afterward, and cut down household loan will make unequal accessibility of financial service widen again.
And also, Professor Oh, another factor stifling social mobility in South Korea is real estate and the constantly rising housing prices. Many young South Koreans have given up hope of ever owning their own home. Apart from the economic impact of that, what are the social and demographic ripple effects? For example, most Koreans want to own their own home before they get married and start a family.
That must be a big question, but I have only a small answer. In finance, as target investment, assets are classified as risky asset and risk-free asset. Under uncertainty, people are prone to put their money in the risk-free asset first. Savings account were once considered as risk-free asset, but near zero interest rate deletes its name from the list because it is not protected against inflation. Instead, money goes directly to the housing market. The young are in despair, forced to invest directly risky assets, so-called cryptocurrency or blockchain whatsoever. In the entry stage of a social life, what the young wants most would be providing safe harbor as a stepping stone. That eagerness represents the demand and price increase in the housing market in Korea. Household debt, mostly used for purchasing houses, grows 7.9%, far exceeding Bank of Korea target line of 6%. Starting from the ground zero, it might be next to impossible to have their own houses. They have lost hope amid quality jobs scarcities. 1 out of every 4 are without full-time job. They try to survive on part-time job without genuine complaint. Job openings are mostly for delivery workers. This is why Big Bang approach rather than step-by-step approach attract the young with rage and revolt. The surge in unemployment and the wealth gap aggravated inequality and stifled the social mobility. Korea would be unable to go forward or upward unless these big questions are solved.
Yeah, it truly is a bit of a depressing situation for a great many people right now in Korea, the state of the economy and their prospects looking forward years and decades to come. But finally, some people, particularly younger people, have argued that it's high time now that South Korea introduced some kind of basic income system, a guaranteed source of money from the government to help people who've either been laid off or too sick to work. We've seen this in a number of European countries, seems to work quite well. What's your stance on introducing universal basic income, or UBI, here in South Korea?
It is to the point at this point to start the discussion of universal basic income. I agree, but it is not the right timing of introducing universal basic income because it is high time of stagflation. Stagflation is when there is a high inflation with stagnant economic growth. Economics is the science of choice. When you choose something in the market, you have to pay the price for the choice. Politics and even mass media are prone to exaggerate the effects of choice only at the sacrifice of cost the society to pay. A few countries, as a test program for 1 year, has introduced universal basic income already with no significant causality between basic income and job opportunities. In 2017, Finland tested as an experiment introducing basic income for the unemployed. In 2018, Sweden also tried to start a universal basic income for supporting low-income growth. There are cases of experiment and result till now, there is no effect. Instead of spreading income, creating income is the solution. It is needed for the less income group to create income in the market competition, easily accessible regardless of their wealth gap or endowment by government policy support. Universal basic income cannot be used as an instrument of an exit from the market, which stifles their capability of upward mobility.
All right. Professor Oh, like always, thank you so much for your insights, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Be my pleasure.